Let's get into this. This is our midterm preview week lineup of shows here. We have governor's races, House races, Senate races, predictions, and then our election night watch party on Tuesday. But today, we are going to focus on the governor's races. We have some races that we want to preview for you guys. And I broke this down into basically three categories here. And the first subcategory, I'll call it the falling stars of the Democratic Party. And I'm going to put Charlie Crist in here, even though he doesn't really belong there because he's not really a celebrity. But in the state of Florida, you have Charlie Crist running against Ron DeSantis. Crist currently polling at 41.5 versus DeSantis at 53.3. DeSantis opened up just a massive lead, 11.8 points in the polls. And this was a race that sort of over the summer got a little bit close, got to within 5 points as the Democrats had some momentum. But really, DeSantis opened up a huge lead, especially after the debate that they had, which I didn't think was anything remarkable. But this looks like something you could pretty squarely put in his column. Obviously, Russell, you have DeSantis picked not only to win this race, but to become the next president. So it can't be much of a surprise that he's got this one pretty much in the bag, as they would say.
Yeah, look, he won COVID. And this is something that you are not very often going to hear about in the corporate media. They're going to frame it. They framed that whole Florida thing the entire time as DeSantis is going nuts. He's going nuts. You know what? All these people from New York, where did they go? They all went to Florida. So clearly they didn't believe it. And this was at the height of COVID. You had all of the rich people from Wall Street. They were all going down to Florida and they were all reporting back to New York. Oh, you know what? It's kind of like normal down here, which made more of them go down to Florida. And now they're not coming back. I've mentioned this before. I do tours on Wall Street, 9 o'clock, 9:30, the market opens. There's nobody there. They all left. Now, to be fair, it was going that way before COVID, but COVID finished it. Like, these guys are just not working at the stock exchange anymore. They left town. They literally left town. Goldman Sachs opened a headquarters in Florida. They never had one down there before, as far as I know. His cultural positions, he's playing that exactly right, except for abortion. I am betting he's trying to do your classic two-step, where later on, if he runs for national office, he tries to tack back at least to the center right on it. He is not going for a full ban, though. I think he's going for, a 16-week? And his, as we discussed, Don't Say Gay bill, which, once again, I misspoke when we did that segment. I said polling, people were overwhelmingly against it by accident. What I meant to say was polling shows people were overwhelmingly for the Don't Say Gay bill. Taking a stand against Disney. Again, we did a video on this. I think, the public, it was something like 70% don't want teachers teaching about sex and gender within the ages that he's talking about. Or was it higher? Was it 80%? It was like an enormous number of parents who, when you're talking about kindergarten to third grade, they do not want that taught to their children. So that's a very popular position. And in a way, this all ties together with our Fetterman video. You cannot fight reality. And that very often feels like what the left and what Democrats are doing. They try to tell you that things are popular, that are deeply unpopular, and that things that they're pushing are something that people are aligned to, and it's just not the case. And when you look at the polling, it shows it's not the case. And when we go into this midterm, I think you're going to see a lot of these figures like DeSantis, who are championing causes that they're telling you are deeply unpopular, but are actually hugely popular, are going to push people like DeSantis not only over the top in Florida. I think it's part of what's going to push him over the top as a presidential candidate.
All right. So the other two here, and these are more examples of sort of the Democrat fading star phenomenon here, because you have two candidates here running for the governor's office, who are just creations of the media. These are people with very little to no substance behind them who have been rendered stars by the liberal media. And I'm talking, of course, about Stacey Abrams, who is running in Georgia and currently losing by an average of 8.5 points to incumbent Governor Kemp. In fact, a new poll has her down by 14 points. And, of course, the guy who I'm sure many of you have forgotten is even running. That's how much he has disappeared from this midterm cycle. Beto O'Rourke, who is down in Texas.
Or as I like to call him, the Great White Hope. Beto, I always wonder, just did anyone get a look? It's trivial now, but if everyone remembers, there was this moment where the media just went all over Beto. What was it in Vanity Fair that he did his pretentious kind of, bebop pseudo Kerouac on the road politician bullshit? I was just born to be in it, man. I was just, they did the picture of him in the jeans leaning against the truck. It was enough to make you want to fucking throw up, man. It embarrassed me for my own generation, because they really marketed him as like he was going to be this pioneer. He was going to be this like first Gen X politician. He was going to kind of represent Gen X taking over, because Obama technically was an Xer, but he didn't really read as an Xer. So that was kind of how they were marketing Beto. And, I didn't know anything about him. I swear I watched one video of him. And this was at a moment that all the Democrat Party SEALs, because they were seeing it in the New York Times, were all going, Beto! Who they didn't know any more about him than I did. They just saw that all the pundits were talking about him, and that's all it takes with those people. So I didn't know. I watched one video. I said, are they fucking kidding? This guy's a fucking moron. This guy's an idiot. What the fuck are they talking about? I watched one video of him doing his fucking I'm the Messiah on a diner countertop, flailing his arms around bullshit. I said, this guy is a fucking moron. This guy's not going to win a primary. This guy will be lucky to get to New Hampshire. Did he get to New Hampshire? I can't even remember now. I don't think he made it, did he?
No. Did he even make it to voting?
Did he ever? So. I don't think he made it to Iowa.
He wasn't in Iowa. No.
And this is why I never understand why these people keep following this media. Like, don't they ever get tired of being embarrassed? Like, don't you feel stupid when you put up that post and those tweets? Oh, yeah, Beto. Yeah, he is going to be a major player. Like, don't you feel dumb? Like, you've been had all the time you spent, hours of your life you can't get back that you read these fucking profiles. Like, don't you feel stupid?
I mean, the thing about Beto was when he ran for Senate in 2018 against Ted Cruz, he was the beneficiary of two major factors that gave him a chance to win. And he almost won. I mean, he came within about 3 points, right? Which in Texas, that's not really almost, because 3 points is a lot of people, right? Yeah. It's a huge population state. But he made it a race. And those two factors were, number one, it was a blue wave year, right? Trump had been elected in 2016. 2018, obviously, that's a blue wave year. So just general dynamics are in Democrats' favor. You can make races close that shouldn't otherwise be close. The second thing is he was running against Ted Cruz, who the MAGA base was still kind of angry at over 2016, because Cruz and Trump had a very hostile primary, and Cruz didn't even endorse him on the stage. Right, and then Cruz didn't...
and he killed Kennedy.
Well, that too. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know how much that would count against you in Texas, actually. That might actually count for you. After all, in doing so, he made one of their boys.
That's true. That's true.
President.
That's true.
LBJ
brought it home for Johnson.
Brought it home for Johnson. Right. Exactly. But yeah. So the fact that there was still a lot of hostility from that 2016 primary, and even after the primary, I mean, Cruz did not endorse Trump on stage at the RNC in 2016. Remember, vote your conscience up and down the ballot, and he got all this shit. Right. So those two factors made it close.
But then he backed down on it, didn't he?
He
later
did,
on
but
he
still,
endorsed
he
him.
did, but
Yeah.
people didn't. There was no love for him amongst the
Right.
MAGA faithful
Right.
by 2018. Now it's far enough where maybe bygones are bygones, you know. But of course, now he's not running against Ted Cruz. He's running for governor against an incumbent in a red wave year, and there was just no way he was ever going to come close, especially with his line in between then and now about how damn right we're going to take your AR-15s. Like, come on, there's no
In
way you're going to win.
Texas.
Yeah,
In
I mean, come on.
Texas.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
way you're going to come back and win that governor's race. He's
Born,
down by.
born to be in it, my fucking ass. You said that in Texas? You're born not to be in it, my friend. You're born to go to a skate park and lick your wounds. That's
Yeah, exactly. So he's down by an average of 9.2 points. We're judging these polling averages, by the way, are based on the Real Clear Politics polling averages. All right, we have another category of races that we want to focus on here. These are just two quick races that I want to preview here called Blue States Gone Red. And one has not gone red. It's just closer than it should be. This is the New York race between Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin. There was a poll in Trafalgar that had this tied. And what's interesting about that is that even though Trafalgar is a right-wing poll, because Republicans have been underpolled the past few cycles, there have actually been surveys that sort of test the accuracy of different polling outfits, and a lot of the right-wing pollers have been more accurate than some of the reputable pollers because of the underpolling of the right wing, especially the sort of new Trump voters that came in 2016. They have been underpolled. And so some of these more right-leaning polls have actually been more accurate. And so that's why you can't dismiss certain polls like American Greatness, Insider Advantage, Trafalgar, even Rasmussen, right? Because they're sampling a little heavily on the Republican side. But when we aggregate all of this turnout, it seems as though in the past couple of cycles, even in 2018, Republicans were underpolled. Never forget, DeSantis was polling well behind Andrew Gillum on Election Day 2018, and he won the governor's race.
Right. Well, this is what's complicated about this cycle, and this applies to every race that we're looking at. Just like in 2016, Trump and Trump's people were either right that there was a hidden Trump vote, in which case they were going to win, or they were wrong, in which case they were going to lose catastrophically. They were going to lose tremendously. They were going to, by modern standards, they were going to lose by 3 to 5 points if they were wrong about that, and they would narrowly win if they were right. Turned out they were right, that there were infrequent voters, rural voters who wouldn't have come out for a Mitt Romney type of candidate, who came out for Trump and pushed him over the top in the Electoral College. Look, Michael Moore, who I'm pretty sure he took a break from those emails, but then I just got another one. Michael Moore is right or he's wrong that there is this hidden women's vote that's not showing up in the polls, and these women are going to push all the Democratic candidates over the top, or a good portion of them, and the polls are going to turn out to be wrong. Or he's wrong, and this is going to be a total bloodbath for Democrats. I don't think there's a middle ground on this. I think it's one or the other.
Look, New York is a red state with a blue city in it.
Yes, it is. You got New York, and then you got the Midwest. People don't realize that about New York State. You don't have to go far out of New York City to basically be in Wisconsin.
You're up
there. You're in it.
Well, where I am is about 60 miles north of New York City, and this is a very purple area. I believe Trump won this area by about 5 points in both 2016 and 2020, meaning Orange County. Dutchess County, which is right across the river from me, he lost that by about 7 or 8 points. The east side of the Hudson River is where more of the New York City transplants go than here on the west side of the river. So even though they're close to each other, politically they're a little different.
Right.
But it's a purple area. And this is an area where a lot of voters go both ways, because it's a lot of city people moving up to the suburbs, either getting richer and getting a little more protective of their money, i.e. a little bit more Republican, people who are just culturally a little more comfortable with the suburban and rural life than they are with city life. So around here is where you get a lot of swing voters. And so this is a real bellwether for the entire state. That's why New York's 18th is close in Congress, and the 19th is close. We're going to be talking about that more tomorrow, obviously. But around here is really a bellwether for how the state's going to go, because a race that gets tight in New York is decided in places like this. And I would be very, very surprised if Hochul wins Orange County, my home county. Now, that doesn't mean that she is going to lose the race, lose the state, but the vibe I'm getting around here is that there's going to be a big vote for Zeldin. And so what that means is I think this race is going to be close. I don't think Hochul's going to lose it, but I think it will be tighter than a lot of people think.
Well, you know what? I just did a tour that went through Sunset Park in Brooklyn today, and that's one of the last kind of working class immigrant neighborhoods left in that part of Brooklyn. And I saw Zeldin signs. I didn't see any Hochul signs. That's an untold story. You know, immigrant neighborhoods very often tend to swing conservative. Like, it doesn't surprise me that an immigrant neighborhood would be going for the anti-crime candidate, or the person who's perceived that way. However, I stick to my theory. I don't think in the wake of Roe going down, a pro-life Republican can win New York State. I don't think the abortion issue is quite as potent as Michael Moore thinks it is in as many places as he thinks it is, but I think it is here. I think it's potent enough here. Remember, Kathy Hochul is a nobody. She's somebody who got the job because Andrew Cuomo liked to diddle people at parties.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, that she's nobody. Nobody knows her. She has no base. She has no support. She has nobody. There are no Hochul Democrats. Nobody even really knows who the fuck she is. That's one of the reasons she's polling so weak. But still, if they hadn't struck down Roe, maybe Zeldin would have a decent shot at it. And in fact, I think he would have a decent shot. It's not the first time. You know, New York State goes Republican sometimes. We had Pataki in here.
Pataki was 94. That was during the red wave of 94. That was the Gingrich revolution, right?
And he got reelected. It's not like he was a one-termer. You know, obviously you had this whole Giuliani Bloomberg era. Bloomberg was a de facto Republican. He was really a throwback to the Rockefeller Republicans of old. So yeah, now New York can go that way. But I think because of Roe, that vouchsafes it. If he were running like a Giuliani Republican, I mean the Giuliani of back then, and just ran as like a pro-choice Republican, he'd have a chance. But he's not. He doesn't. That's not his record, and he can't change it now. And he's not trying to. He's his argument, which is a terrible one, is essentially, yeah, I'm a crazy pro-life whack job, but hey, the assembly will stop me anyway. So what do you got to lose?
Right, exactly.
That's not an argument. You know?
But, you know, oddly enough, it is funny because we're going to pivot now to the second example of a blue state trending redder, and that is the Oregon race. You have Republican Christine Drazen versus Tina Kotek versus an independent candidate named Betsy Johnson, who's actually polling at 14 points. So it is actually kind of an interesting race there in Oregon. During the debate there, Christine Drazen actually said, when the Roe issue came up, she said, look, I think Oregon is an extreme state in terms of, you know, allowing abortion up till birth, which who knows if that's even true, but that's what she said. You know, late-term abortion being legal there. She called it a destination for abortion tourism, which I don't know where these tourists would be coming from. I guess Idaho, right? Because Washington has abortion.
I work for Tours by Locals, so they have that.
Oh, they do have that. Oh, okay.
I do that tour.
You do that one. Yeah, do that one.
You go to all the clinics. They like
right. Yeah, it's bus tour. You know? Stops in what? Eugene, Bend, Portland.
Salem, what's great is the way we do it. We combine it with the gospel tour.
Yeah, right.
You go to the abortion clinic and then you go to church.
But she said, look, I mean, she basically talked about how these laws were unjust, but then she ended her little segment of the debate there by saying, But as governor, I will uphold the law. That's the law, and I'll uphold the law. So she basically punted on that issue, which is risky because that's not a base play. Midterms tend to be base elections, and that is not a base play. That is basically what she's saying is, I'm going to punt on this issue because we need change statewide. And she even said to the voters, I was actually, I mean, I don't know how savvy it was, but it was interesting because she said this thing where like, okay, I will uphold the law, meaning I'm not going to ban, reproductive care in our state, but we really need a change. We need a change in all these other ways, economically, in terms of crime and homelessness and all this stuff. And so vote for me anyway. Like, even if you're pro-choice, it was a wink. Like, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. Now, how people trust her to actually follow through on that, I don't know. But she is up. She is actually leading in the polls in a blue state after Roe versus Wade. All right, she's up by 1.7 points. It's very, very close, but she's up 40.7 to 39 points, which is Tina Kotek in second place, and then Betsy Johnson has 14 in third. Now, the interesting thing about Betsy Johnson in this race is that she is a former Democrat who left the party. She's running as an independent now, but she seems pretty right-wing to me. A lot of people in Oregon are worried that she's going to take votes away from Kotek. But I watched the debate. Johnson is anti-lockdown. She is anti-drug. She's, tough on crime. She's pro-gun, and she's pro-landlord. I mean, she took a very, very strict stance on, like, no, we shouldn't have extended the eviction moratorium. There are landlords that need us to do their bidding. Right. White landowners really have lacked representation in this country. They're very, very, very underrepresented group. So she seems pretty right-wing to me. So I don't know how many votes she's taking away from the Democrat versus the Republican. It seems to me like she's more in Drazen's lane than in Kotek's lane.
It seems that way, yeah.
The only thing about Johnson, the only left-wing position that she has is she is pro-choice. And she voiced that pretty strongly. And actually, she called out Planned Parenthood during the debate because Planned Parenthood apparently endorsed Kotek pretty early on. And Johnson claims that they didn't even want to hear Betsy Johnson make her case for their endorsement. And she said on the stage that Planned Parenthood is basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic Party now, which it is true. It's absolutely true. Yeah.
Well, the side of this I think you really have to look at that should the Republican win, the Democrats are going to diligently avoid looking at because this is one of these areas that's very fraught for them. Look, Seattle and Portland. The whole CHOP autonomous zone. How do you think that played to voters in Oregon? Really, at the end of the day, the mayor siding with an angry mob that wants to burn down the police station. Do you think that's a good look? The entire West Coast is being affected by these trends, and you're having that in the cities in Oregon, and I think that's a big part of why the Republican is doing that well. I think you're seeing that in LA in the mayor's race. I think you're gonna see that. Well, you saw that in San Francisco, where you had the parents recalling the school board. You're having that all along the West Coast. This rejection of this very extreme. I hesitate to call it a left ideology, but I guess it's in the family. Of essentially anarchy. Now look, I'm not blaming people for whom the system really has no value for seeing anarchy as appealing, but it's not the way to win an election. You can't run on that.
No, I mean, it's an oxymoron to try and win an election on anarchy. An election is an expression of organized sentiment. Right? That's the whole point of what an election is. And so, yes, obviously, those kinds of sentiments are going to cost you at the ballot. Now, the thing about this, I mean, this is more...
And Portland supposedly has just completely gone off the rails.
Well, look, this is more a national issue than it is just an Oregon issue. But since this did come up a lot in this race, I mean, a lot of this race is about the economy, about homelessness in Portland, about housing. There's all this talk about, well, the problem with housing is there's a supply issue. We need more buildings. We need to issue more permits. And actually, the Republicans started running on this, is we need less regulation to attract more builders, to build more houses. Betsy Johnson talked about how the drug problem in Portland is contributing to homelessness. And it's funny because, you could have seen a thing like this coming years out. When COVID hits and we're thinking, okay, I mean, the very first episode that Russell and I did after the lockdowns began it was entitled "The Coronavirus and the Case for Social Democracy." Back then, we were only doing full-length podcasts. We weren't on YouTube. We weren't doing it, So anyway, the idea was that this was an opportunity to reorganize society and reprioritize wellness, security, housing, food, clothing, shelter, figure out ways to strengthen the social safety net so that if and when emergencies like a pandemic do happen, we are prepared for it. And in the meantime, we create better lives for more people anyway, right?
How naive people were. Does anyone remember there was this little video going around? I don't know how viral it went, where it was somebody reading a bedtime story to their children. And it was so hopeful. It was, yes, and we almost destroyed the planet. But then there was a pandemic and everyone came together and we cleaned up the environment. And, it was just this vision of how this incident was going to lead to a utopian post-COVID paradise.
Well, that was seen as the opportunity, right? It was seen as like, okay, now is the time. Like if this does not make the case against this sort of status quo neoliberal capitalism, then what will?
Right.
But that's not how it happened, obviously. That's not how it turned out. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the Democrats' COVID policies are so unpopular. It is an albatross around their neck right now. It's dragging a lot of Democratic politicians down. In the Oregon debate, same thing. Yep. And the reason why the lockdowns were so unpopular is because you didn't actually transform society in the ways we were just talking about. All you did was impose these burdens on people, making it even harder for them to make ends meet while still maintaining this overall economic dynamic of every man for himself, right? So all you did was make things harder for people. If you had passed a permanent child's UBI, if we had gotten some of the Build Back Better items out of this, then they'd be more forgiving. All you did was burden them with all of these regulations. And that's why this is the first election.
In the end, the money you gave them, they're losing to inflation. They're losing to gas prices.
Of course.
They didn't get to keep that money.
Losing to interest rates if they want to buy something now, right? I mean,
now they can't. What family can afford these interest rates now?
Exactly. And that's why a lot of this is so unpopular.
I think they're north of 7% now after this.
I forget what it was. They just went up yesterday.
They just went up above 7, I think.
So we didn't actually do that. And it shouldn't have been much of a surprise that rather than have this campaign season, these 2022 midterms, be about what we can do to actually strengthen society in a post-pandemic world. What are we doing? We're actually just taking for granted the ruins that COVID has wrought on us, because now we're feeling the economic, impacts of these massive disturbances in labor supply, right? We're feeling the impacts of that, and we're taking them for granted. We're just conceding that we can't really do anything about them. Even the Republicans aren't really saying they're going to do anything about inflation. What's their plan on it? They haven't articulated anything. They've said fuck all. Instead, what this campaign is about is symptom management, right? Crime. Oh, crime and homelessness are out of control, so we have to deal with that. Totally ignoring the fact that, hey, drugs don't cause homelessness. There have been drugs in Portland since the fucking Lewis and Clark era, okay? Drugs don't cause homelessness. You know what causes homelessness? Lack of money. Lack of money is what causes homelessness, because you need money to be able to afford housing. Here's a stat that's going to blow people's mind. About 40% of homeless people in this country work. They're employed. In New York City, 45% of single homeless people are employed. 38% of homeless families have at least one person in the workforce. The people don't get paid enough. They don't make enough money. And so if you're going to have an election, you would think the election in a healthy country would be about addressing causes, not about symptom management. But no, because the voters of this country are generally very bougie. It's generally the middle class who votes. They don't think of it that way. The issues are, how do we deal with homelessness? How do we deal with drug addicts? How do we deal with crime? It's all very reactionary. And that's why that's part of why you're seeing this red wave. Because, and look, a lot of this is on the fault of the Democratic Party. They let Joe Manchin dick them around on the Build Back Better thing. They let Kristen Sinema fuck them up. If they had come down on those two senators when they had a chance to and passed paid family leave, passed Medicare expansion, passed a permanent child tax credit, passed universal pre-K, then they would not be in this spot. Because we would have actually taken the opportunity that the pandemic gave us to reassess our priorities and make that the new normal. Make that the those would be the new terms upon which we have these arguments. But we didn't do any of that. And so now you're just left with this just hellish world in which homeless people are everywhere, drugs are everywhere. And how do we stop it? More cops, more homeless beds, more jails. It's one way, the wrong way. There's no way to win the argument. There's no way for the Democrats to win this argument because they did not take the opportunity to change the conversation. That would be my point, crystallized.
I wrote an article about it. Because we were not going to solve the economic underpinnings of crime, I said this was going to be a repeat of the 70s, where you have more lenient policing leads to an explosion in crime because you haven't addressed crime. You haven't really addressed the problem. You haven't really addressed the reason that you have this criminal underclass. So just not policing people, that's why mass incarceration was partly responsible for a drop in crime, but it's a horrible solution. As you say, it's a vicious circle, right? Society gets more and more inhumane, creating more and more homeless, more and more criminality. So you lock up more and more people and you make the society more and more unequal and you lock up more and more people. And it's a never ending cycle, but you cannot, if you don't want to empower a right-wing reactionary movement, you cannot tell the police to step back without addressing the underlying causes of why you needed these enormous police forces like we have in New York in the first place. You can't do the one without empowering people who are going to ride the crime fear into office. That's exactly what happened in the 70s and 80s.
All right, so we have one third category that we're going to get to before we wrap. These are the swing races. The three really tight swing races here are Wisconsin. That's probably the closest of these three, so we'll do that one first. That's Tony Evers versus Tim Michels, although I like to call him Michels because he spells it Michels. Michels is with an A. Michels with no A is, Michels.
Michels. Yeah.
That's
Michels.
what I'll call him. I'll call you that. Michels has a average polling lead of 0.2 points. So that is within half a point. So that is extremely, extremely close. In Wisconsin, there is a senator's race there between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes, which is also underway. That is a little less close. Johnson has about a 2.7 point lead there. We'll get more into that on Saturday, obviously. But the interesting thing about this race, and look, Wisconsin and all of that those upper Midwest states, the former blue wall until 2016, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these have now become brutally difficult for Democrats to win. It's not that they never win them anymore. Biden won Wisconsin, but he won it very, very slimly.
Yes.
And this is an extremely close race. And the interesting thing about this is that Wisconsin, even though it's a swing state, has a very Republican state legislature. What that means, excuse me, is that putting a Republican governor in charge would really just open up the floodgates for right-wing policy.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
there'd be nothing stopping Wisconsin from becoming the new Florida. In fact, there was an article that asked, is Wisconsin going to be the new Florida? Because it's the same kind of dynamic. Florida's technically close to a 50-50 swing state, but Republicans have gotten all the power there. And so that could be Wisconsin if Michaels pulls this out. It's anybody's guess. When it's that close, there's simply no way to guess where that's going to go. But again, it really is indicative of something that in a post-Roe environment, a state that has gone blue more than it's gone red over the last decade or two is now flirting with another Republican governor. And look, Scott Walker did a number on that state during his years with union busting and fucking with the teachers. And so like, that's not too long ago. The fact that they are flirting with going back in that direction now in a post-Roe
And Barack
world,
Obama did nothing.
well, of course,
Absolutely nothing.
of course,
Did not show up to help the unions. Did not speak out for them. Did absolutely
no. They had Tom
nothing.
Morello from Rage Against the Machine went and played for them. He showed up, but not Barack Obama. Yeah. Yeah, and so that's gonna be one to watch, because you would think if there's a state where Dobbs would have an impact, it might be there, since it is more a blue state than a red state, even though it's a swing state at this point. You could have a runaway train of Republican policy if Michaels wins that race, and it looks like now there's a 50-50 chance that he will.
I come on, man. We always knew the Nazi hordes were going to come flooding out of the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if any place was going to be the seat of an American national socialism, it was going to be the Midwest.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that.
This goes way back to George Rockwell in Illinois, right? That's, anybody ever see the Blues Brothers movie, Illinois Nazis? I think a lot of these, and I know we were going to get into the Michigan thing, which ties into our dad anti-woke dad video.
Well, we'll do that now. Let me just give the Michigan numbers, and then we'll just go right into that, since that's next on the list here. So in Michigan, you have Gretchen Whitmer at 49.2 versus Tudor Dixon, the Republican challenger, at 45.8. So that's Whitmer with an average spread of about 3 points, which honestly is a little higher than she's doing better than I thought she would be doing a year ago. A year ago, I'd have said there's no way she's going to hang on and win.
Yeah.
And the polls have tightened significantly because she was up by about 10 over the summer.
Right.
So she is in more trouble now than she was a couple months ago. But this is the most surprising of all the governor's races to me. I thought Whitmer, between her lockdown policies and the backlash to that there, and the just red wave sort of year that we're in, I didn't think she had much of a chance at hanging on, but she's in it. She's in it. I mean, she's up. She's up. She's up by a little bit. There's no guarantees, obviously, but she is up. Go ahead.
This is one where I'm going to say I'm skeptical of those polls. I think there is a hidden vote against her. I know that her opponent has been running. He's been capitalizing on this parents' movement against some of what's being taught in certain public schools. And I think that's potent. I think if he's able to mobilize a hidden Muslim vote, a hidden parents vote, a hidden cultural backlash vote, combined with, as you say, her lockdown policies, and she's one of those candidates who Abrams really gets hurt by having become a national Democrat. It's very hard once you get tied to the national party to run in a swing-ish kind of state like that, because you can't peel off any of the Republicans once you get that stink on you. Once you get that stink of being part of the national pantheon, right, you can't run as a different kind of Democrat. You can't run as the local kind of Democrat that can peel off moderate Republicans. I think Whitmer has some of that problem. Not as much as Abrams, but some of it. So I am going to say her opponent outperforms, possibly to the tune of winning. I think those polls are off. I think there's a hidden vote for the Republican.
Well, it's funny because Tudor Dixon recently had a rally in Dearborn, Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan was the site of the parent protests. They were
Yep.
protesting the sexually explicit materials in the public schools. We did a
Yep.
segment on that a couple weeks ago. Now, Dearborn, Michigan in 2020 went for Biden 74%. So the fact that there's a Republican campaigning there means she's seeing an opportunity in a blue enclave. Arizona, we have Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, who is the current Secretary of State. She actually won an election to be Secretary of State by only 20,000 votes, even while Republican Governor Doug Ducey is in office. So she is a Democrat serving as Secretary of State under a Republican governor currently. But he is outgoing, and Carrie Lake is running to be the next governor of Arizona, and she is up by an average of 2.7 points. She's polling at 48.4 to Katie Hobbs' 45.7. Now, a lot of these races we were able to study for by watching the debates between the candidates, except in Arizona there was no debate because Katie Hobbs refused to debate Carrie Lake. And so that's just not a look that plays particularly well, I don't think. I don't think people like when people dodge debates. And Lake has been going up in the polls the last couple weeks. I think that is a factor. But, look, Arizona went full MAGA in their nominees between the Senate and the governor's race. And it looks like that strategy seems more likely than not to pay off in the governor's race. The Senate race is a different story, slightly different story, which we'll get to on Saturday. But, yeah, it looks like Lake is even opening up somewhat of a lead here because the average of polls has her up by 2.7, but almost all of the more recent polls have her winning. And so, you have to think she has a slight edge going in.
My money has been on Lake ever since the first time I watched Hobbs speak. Hobbs reads like the suburban, wealthy, white woman liberal that everyone hates. So I really want to serve the people of Arizona, and I am going to immediately set up my office in a way that people are going to be very proud of. No, not in Arizona, baby. That person is not winning in Arizona. And then you watch Lake. Yeah, she's a screwball. So's Trump. It's great show business to be a screwball. She comes out of TV. She was a TV anchor, so she knows how to manage it. She knows how to work it. She's not just all over the place. She's not just chaotic. And in the end, I think that's why Hobbs didn't want to debate her, because Lake would have eaten her alive on TV. I think in the end, her people decided it's going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. Yes, if they're smart, they knew it was going to hurt her not to debate. I think they felt it was going to hurt her more to debate. I think they thought that having her up there with this person who actually knows how to perform in front of a camera and knows how to play to the press, she was going to get destroyed in that debate. They said, you know what, fuck it. We'll just use the excuse that we don't want a platform.
Right, that she's beyond the pale and hope that plays with a certain moderate constituency that they're hoping they can convince on those grounds.
And that's another thing. People hate that shit. They hate that shit. This democratic tendency to rule their opponents out of bounds, I think that just hurts you more. In the end, it hurts you more. It plays to, she reads as every negative idea that you might have about Democrats made flesh, right down to the fact of the grotesque hypocrisy, because she was part of a lawsuit against the Nevada, was it the Assembly or was it the State Senate?
I'm not sure.
Well, they were sued by a black staff member, female, who claimed that she was getting paid, not claimed, she legitimately claimed that she was getting paid less than her white counterparts, and they fired her. And she won a lawsuit. I think at first they did award her millions. I'm not sure of the exact amount. That was reduced under federal law to $300,000, and then based on lost wages, it wound up being $353,000. And Hobbs was the head of Senate or Assembly. She was the head. And at first, when that ruling came down, she tried to deflect responsibility. saying that it was the Republicans' fault, basically, and also that she had nothing for her. But at the same time, she claimed to have supported it, but saying that it had nothing to do with her race and gender. It was because she had to go out of town because her son was sick and she lost confidence in her. That was the claim she made. That didn't play well. You had black leaders urging people to think about voting for somebody else in the primaries. So then she gave it another pass where somebody sat down and wrote the proper social justice language for her. Are we going to play that?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State and candidate for governor. Over the past several weeks, I've heard from many of you about my response to the discrimination that Tanya Adams faced as an employee in the legislature. I understand that my response fell short of taking real accountability. Please allow me to say this clearly and unequivocally. I apologize to Ms. Adams. I'm truly sorry for the real harm that I caused Ms. Adams and her family. My response to the jury verdict was short-sighted, unnecessarily defensive, and failed to meet the moment. I know that the disappointment felt by many Arizonans didn't start with the verdict in this case. What Ms. Adams experienced is yet another example of the systemic inequities and racism that have long permeated every aspect of our lives, too often in ways that are invisible to people like me. I recognize that my experience and understanding of racism.
I'm not laughing at that
sometimes been too
sentiment.
narrow.
I'm laughing at
I've
the
missed
clear,
personal
like,
and
hostage
leadership
video
opportunities
quality
to
of
fight
this.
harder for
Yeah.
racial equity.
That was a
I am
teleprompter
committed to growing,
pause there.
learning, and holding myself accountable. My Catholic faith taught me to fight for justice and inspired me to serve.
Pause.
First as a social worker,
Look
and now as a
meaningfully
public
into
servant.
camera.
Yeah.
But for too long, I've allowed myself to only show up where it's comfortable. I know that the only way to earn your trust is to not only continue to reflect upon my past actions.
All right, blah, blah,
but
blah.
to
Do we get
put
this?
in
Do we
the
have to sit
work.
through the whole thing?
I need to
Fuck
be
no.
more.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jay. Yes, we're being merciful and cutting that off. Like, literally, as soon as she starts speaking, you say, how do I vote against this person? How do I make sure I don't have to listen to this person's voice for the next 6 fucking years? Anybody. Anybody. I'll vote for anyone but this person. And so often the Democrats field people like that, and they don't get it because they like these people. They like people like this. They don't understand how repulsive they are outside of their bubble.
Well, thank you guys very much for watching. This was a great talk. We will see you guys back here tomorrow. We will have clipped segments from these. I'll have to figure out how to do that. We had some technical problems with Anise, but hopefully we can get Anise back here for tomorrow. And we'll work on that. I'm going to start working on that as soon as we're done here. Thank you guys very much for watching. Patreon.com/DoDissidents. You can help support this show. And please like this stream and please subscribe to this channel on the way out. Thank you very much, everybody. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Please clap.